They wear the badge. They carry the weight of justice. They're trained to stay calm when the rest of us would run. But even police officers, those we trust to face the worst, have stories they'll never tell in court, never write down in reports. Stories that defy logic, that stay with them long after the case is closed or abandoned. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true horror stories from officers who encountered something so strange, so terrifying, they couldn't explain it, so they never filed it. Story 1, the woman at mile marker 53. Deputy Mark Holloway had driven Highway 27 more times than he could count. The long, winding stretch that cut through rural Arkansas was known for little more than deer crossings and the occasional drunk driver. But ever since the night of September 14, 2018, Mark never drove that highway alone again. At least, not without his cruiser windows locked and his dashboard camera rolling. It was 2:46 a.m. when the dispatch came in. A call from a trucker reporting a woman walking barefoot along the shoulder, right around mile marker 53. Mark was already nearby, just 10 minutes out. He figured it was a case of a stranded driver, or maybe someone fleeing a domestic dispute. These things happen more than you'd think in the middle of nowhere. He flicked on his lights and headed toward the location. As he approached, his headlights caught her. She was standing perfectly still, not walking, not looking around, not waving for help, just standing there. Her long black hair was matted, hanging in front of her face, and her white dress looked old, almost like something from a vintage shop. She was thin, barefoot, and completely silent. Mark slowed to a crawl and rolled down his passenger window. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called out. No response. She didn't even flinch. He put the cruiser in park and stepped out cautiously, keeping his hand near his holster out of habit. "I'm Deputy Holloway with the Pope County Sheriff's Office. Are you hurt? Do you need medical assistance?" Still nothing. She turned her head slowly and looked at him. Her face was pale, like she'd been drained of all blood. Her eyes didn't look quite right in the glow of the cruiser's high beams. Too dark, too empty. Before Mark could speak again, she opened her mouth and let out a sound that wasn't a scream, but something more like a high-pitched exhale. A dry, cracking whisper that sent a chill down his spine. Wrong way. Then she bolted, not toward the woods or down the road, but directly across the highway. Mark instinctively shouted, "Stop!" and took off after her, but by the time he reached the other side, she was gone. No crunch of leaves, no silhouette in the tree line, just gone. Back at the cruiser, Mark radioed it in as a suspicious person sighting and requested backup. A second deputy, Stevens, arrived 20 minutes later with a search dog. They combed the area. Nothing. No footprints, no discarded shoes, not even tire marks. Frustrated but following protocol, Mark checked the dashcam footage, hoping to at least get a face shot. But when he replayed the video, his stomach turned. There was no woman. The headlights illuminated the shoulder clearly. You could see the grass, the trees, the very spot where she had stood. But she wasn't there. Mark's voice was audible, talking to someone. But the camera showed him talking to thin air. "Maybe you were tired," Stevens suggested. "Your shift started at 6, right?" Mark didn't reply. He knew what he saw. Over the following weeks, Mark became obsessed. He started asking around about mile marker 53. That's when he discovered that in 1997, a young woman named Elaine Carter had vanished from that very spot. Her car had been found just a few yards off the shoulder, keys still in the ignition, door wide open. She'd left behind no signs of struggle, no note, no trace. Elaine had been wearing a white dress. Her fiancé told police she'd bought it for their engagement photos. Mark dove deeper. He pulled the original missing person report and scanned every photo. And in one grainy image from the roadside, he saw her, Elaine, standing near her car. Same long black hair, same pale skin, same eyes. He visited her old home, spoke to her now elderly mother. When he showed her a still from the dashcam video, just the shoulder of the highway, her mother asked, "Is that where they said she vanished?" Mark nodded. "She always said that road gave her the creeps," the woman whispered. "Even as a child, she used to say there were things living in the woods there, watching." Over the next few months, Mark heard whispers from other officers, tales of weird sightings along the same stretch of road, figures darting between trees, cold spots in summer, radios crackling with static just around mile marker 53. But none of those stories were ever written down. not in official reports. Because what do you write? Saw a ghost? Instead, Mark started carrying a photo of Elaine Carter in his glove compartment. He drove that road every night he was on shift, always slowing at mile marker 53, always watching the shoulder. And sometimes, just sometimes, he swore he saw her there again, flickering in the darkness like a glitch in the world, just long enough for a shiver to climb his spine before she vanished once more. He never told dispatch about the sightings after that night, never filed another report, but he did start locking the cruiser doors every time without fail. Because the woman at mile marker 53, she never needed a ride. She was already going somewhere. And God help the poor soul who decided to follow. Story 2. The basement at Red Hill Residence. Officer James Rennick had been with the city police for nearly 12 years when he was assigned to the Red Hill Residence disturbance. The call had come in just past 1:30 a.m. A neighbor reported hearing glass breaking and loud screaming from the old manor on 52nd Street, a property long rumored to be abandoned. Red Hill Residence had a reputation. Built in the 1920s, it once served as a retirement home, then briefly as a psychiatric facility in the 60s, before shutting down entirely in the early 90s. Since then, the building had stood empty, boarded up, and slowly decaying into its foundation. Local kids whispered about rituals in the basement, shadows behind the windows, and the flickering of lights when there was no electricity. Rennick didn't believe in ghost stories, but he hated Red Hill. Every officer did. It was the kind of place you'd get sent to for noise complaints and trespassers, the usual teen thrill-seekers breaking in for kicks. He figured this night would be no different. He pulled up to the curb in front of the residence. His headlights stretched across the facade, illuminating busted windows and graffiti-tagged stone walls. The front gate stood open, rusted hinges groaning in the wind. As Rennick stepped out of the cruiser, he radioed in. "Dispatch? 143 on scene at Red Hill Residence. Investigating report of disturbance. Copy, 143. Proceed with caution." He approached the front door cautiously. One of the boards nailed across it was broken, fresh wood splintered outward. Someone had forced their way in. He drew his flashlight and pushed into the foyer. Dust, thick, stagnant air, the scent of mildew and something older. Something like rusted iron. He swept his light across the interior. The place was trashed, old furniture overturned, paint peeling in great strips from the walls. But what caught his eye immediately was the trail of fresh, muddy footprints. Small, barefoot. "Hello?" he called. "This is the police. You need to come out now." Silence. He followed the footprints down the hall, deeper into the structure. They veered left, past what once may have been a recreation room, and ended at a heavy metal door. The basement access. It was ajar. He hesitated. The air leaking from the gap in the door was unnaturally cold. Far too cold for a summer night. And there was something else. A hum, low and steady, like the vibration of a distant generator. But the residence had no power. Still, Rennick pushed the door open and descended. The basement stairs creaked under his boots. The deeper he went, the darker it became, as though the shadows swallowed even the beam of his flashlight. He reached the bottom and found himself in a corridor lined with storage rooms and supply closets. Then the humming stopped. Total silence. And that's when he heard the whisper. Not from down the hall, but directly behind him. He spun, flashlight raised, but no one was there. "Is someone down here?" he barked. Again, no response. Just silence. And then a soft sound like a dragging foot. His pulse quickened. Rennick moved forward slowly, sweeping his light across the corridor. Most of the doors were closed, except one at the very end. Its hinges hung awkwardly, the door slightly tilted in the frame. From inside came a soft dripping noise. He approached. The room was small, tiled like a washroom. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and a large industrial sink sat in one corner, crusted with brown. The tiles beneath it were wet. Then he noticed the handprint. It was smeared across the wall, dark red, almost black in the dim light. Long fingers. Too long. He stepped back. Something didn't feel right. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the corridor, another door slamming shut. He rushed back into the hall, gun drawn now, flashlight trembling. The once open basement was now claustrophobic, every corner a threat. He moved cautiously, heart pounding. Then, breathing. Slow, raspy, just ahead. He rounded a corner and saw a figure, a child, no older than 9, pale, eyes wide and unblinking. She stood motionless in the center of the hallway. "Hey!" Rennick shouted. "Are you hurt? What's your name?" The girl didn't answer, just stared. "Let's get you out of here, all right?" He took a step forward. The girl opened her mouth. No words came out. Only a high-pitched sound, like feedback from a speaker, so loud and sharp it made Rennick drop his flashlight. In the moment of darkness, he heard something move, fast, behind him. He spun, gun raised, and flicked the flashlight back on. Empty. But the girl was gone too, just vanished. Rennick stood frozen, breath heavy, skin cold with sweat. Then he heard it again, the dragging footstep. But this time, it was coming from inside the walls. That was enough. He turned and ran, bolting up the stairs, nearly tripping on the top step as he burst into the hallway above. He didn't stop until he was back in his cruiser, doors locked, hands shaking. Back at the station, he filed the report simply as trespassing, no contact. He didn't mention the girl, or the whisper, or the sound that still rang in his ears long after he'd left the basement. But weeks later, curiosity got the better of him. He dug into old city records, found the original blueprints of Red Hill residence. That basement hallway? The one with the washroom? It didn't exist in the plans. Even stranger, back in 1974, a nurse reported 3 missing children from the psychiatric wing. She claimed they disappeared one night after being led into the Red Hall, beneath the residence by one of the orderlies. The case was never resolved. The nurse, when pressed, recanted her story. She later hung herself in her home. Rennick never returned to Red Hill. But sometimes when he's on patrol and drives past 52nd Street, his radio will crackle with static, just for a moment. And in that static, he swears, he can still hear the breathing. Story 3, the caller who knew too much. Officer Daniel Briggs had been working night shifts in the rural township of Anderton County for nearly 8 years. It was mostly uneventful. Drunk drivers, the occasional domestic disturbance, a lost dog here and there. But one night in mid-October, something happened that he never filed in an official report. Not because he was afraid of being believed, but because it left him with a feeling he couldn't explain. One that lingered long after the call ended. At 1:43 a.m., dispatch reported a 911 call from a landline registered to an address on Elk Pine Road. The house in question had been unoccupied for over 15 years, ever since the last resident, an elderly woman named Edna Marrow, died from natural causes. Locals claimed the place was haunted, but that kind of small-town lore didn't impress Briggs. He marked it down as a prank call and decided to drive by to double-check. As he approached the property, the beams from his cruiser's headlights illuminated the dilapidated structure. The front porch was sagging, windows were boarded up, and weeds grew through cracks in the foundation. No lights, no cars, no signs of life. Still, procedure was procedure. He stepped out, radioed dispatch that he had arrived, and approached the front door. To his surprise, the front door was slightly ajar. It creaked when he pushed it open, revealing a hallway layered in dust and cobwebs. The air was heavy, musty, with the sharp tinge of something rotten. "Police," he called out, shining his flashlight into the darkness. "Anyone here?" No response. Only the soft creak of the house settling and the occasional rustle of leaves from outside. But then came the unmistakable sound of a phone ringing. It was an old rotary phone, cream-colored and mounted to the wall in the hallway. And it was ringing. Daniel stood there for a moment, stunned. This house had no electricity. The landline should have been disconnected years ago. And yet, the phone rang steadily, piercing the silence with each mechanical chime. Against his better judgment, he picked it up. There was silence for a few seconds, and then a voice came through, crackly, distant, like a recording made decades ago. "Officer Briggs," the voice said. He froze. "Who is this?" More static. Then, "Don't go into the basement." He felt the blood drain from his face. "Who is this?" he repeated, louder now, his voice wavering slightly. The line went dead. Briggs stood there, staring at the receiver in his hand. How had they known his name? His presence? And more importantly, what basement? He had walked the entire length of the house earlier, but hadn't seen any stairs leading down. Still, his instincts told him to check again. If someone was in danger, if there was even the slightest chance, it was his duty to investigate. He moved deeper into the house, stepping carefully over broken floorboards and sagging furniture. In the kitchen, under a peeling rug and rusted table, he found it, a trapdoor. It was small and locked with a chain, but the wood surrounding it was brittle. Briggs broke through with the butt of his flashlight and descended into the dark with his hand on his holster. The air grew colder as he moved down the narrow stairs. The flashlight barely illuminated the cramped stone basement. Shelves lined the walls, empty except for thick layers of dust. And then he saw it. A figure, slumped against the far wall. He rushed forward, heart pounding. As he got closer, the beam of light revealed a mannequin. Not a person, just a mannequin. But it was dressed like a 1970s police officer. Brown uniform, vintage badge, and a name tag. Briggs leaned closer. The name tag read, D. Briggs. He stumbled backward. The flashlight slipped from his grip and clattered to the ground, sending the beam skittering across the walls. For a moment, he saw movement, like a shadow pulling away just as the light hit it. Breathing heavily, he retrieved the flashlight and turned to leave. As he started up the stairs, the phone upstairs began to ring again. He didn't answer it. He exited the house without a word, locked the door behind him, and radioed dispatch. No sign of anyone. Probably a false alarm, he said. That was the only sentence he put in his report. Back at the station, he checked records on the property. Nothing unusual. No deaths, no reports, no other 911 calls in years. But what haunted him wasn't just the mannequin. It was the voice on the phone. A week later, curiosity got the better of him. He visited the county archives and requested the list of former officers. Among the yellowed pages, he found it. A Daniel Briggs, badge number 176, served from 1971 to 1978, died in the line of duty. The circumstances of death? Found dead in the basement of a house on Elk Pine Road during a wellness check. Same name, same property, a record that shouldn't exist. He never told anyone. But some nights, the radio in his cruiser crackles with static, and sometimes, just beneath the noise, he hears a voice whisper, "Don't go into the basement." Some stories stay off the record, not because they lack truth, but because no one would believe them. These are the moments that live in the quiet spaces of a patrol car at 2 a.m., in the dark corners of abandoned homes, or in the cold, steady ring of a phone that should have been dead. For these officers, it's not about fear. It's about the chilling certainty that some things, no matter how well-trained or rational you are, simply can't be explained. And sometimes, the scariest part isn't what they saw, it's what followed them home.